Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 369 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. All right, today got on a little something different, combining Coach Boyle's segment with the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. So I have Coach Boyle on together with Chuck Wolf. He's the director of Human Motion Associates. He is basically a legend. If you don't know his name, I'd really be surprised if you don't know who he is. But he has over 40 years of experience working with the best of the best. And it's not one of those, hey, this guy works with Olympic athletes and pros. He really does. He's the real deal. And this was actually his idea. After speaking with Mike, they had a conversation about some things. And we kind of wanted to turn into conversation about essentially adapting to change, so evolving, and with all the technological changes, even though so much has changed, a lot has stayed the same from a fundamental perspective, and really just going to go over navigating some of those changes through the years, whether that's through the technology or what the guys are doing within their programming or how they see those changes, or what they've adapted or what they haven't adapted. So really good stuff coming up from the two of them in a little while. For the Naamly Maximizing the Member Experience segment with Sumit Seth, he's the founder of Naamly. Sumit's going to talk about the secrets of escape rooms and how they can supercharge your gym's success. This is a fun one from Sumi, because basically him and his family were, right around Halloween. He recorded this on Halloween and basically was talking about the family had gone to one, and kind of, I love the way he can take something that he does with his family or in real life and then relate it to the gym experience. So good stuff coming up from Sumi as well. Guys, the holiday sale from Perform Better, it is here. It is up to 40% off on so many items. I was just looking at it. Sale items include the Ultimate Sandbag, TRX trainers, all kinds of bands, med balls, plyo boxes, dumbbells, barbells, bumper plates, racks, you name it. Guys, check it all out at performbetter.com. All right, lots of things to get to. Normally we get on the phone with Coach Boyle, but today we're going to start out with the Maximizing the Member Experience segment with Sumit Seth. Here we go.
Welcome to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment. My name is Sumit Seth, and I'm the co-founder of Naamly. And today, I'm about to unveil the secrets of escape rooms and how they can supercharge your gym success. My family and I are fresh from a thrilling escape room adventure. It's Halloween after all. Well, at least when I'm recording this segment. And it got me thinking, if we put the right themes in place, a person's fitness journey could be their adventure of a lifetime. First, think about some popular escape room themes for a moment. The Enchanted Castle escape room. The initial impressions that initially come to my mind are mystical artifacts, secret passageways, and hidden clues in an ancient fortress. Second, the Time Traveler's Quest escape room. For me, that renders images of a futuristic gadgets, intricate puzzles, and a race against time through historical eras. Third, the Haunted Mansion escape room. Ooh, this one, it's the eerie ambience, the ghostly whispers, and spine-chilling challenges in a Victorian estate. Now, what do all of these have in common? A clear and distinct narrative theme. The theme is the backbone of the escape room, driving every other element towards a coherent storyline that engulfs the participants. Let me tell you about our experience and how your gym can take a page from their book and turn your fitness center into an immersive adventure. We chose a sci-fi themed room called Rogue Robot Redemption. In the Rogue Robot Redemption escape room, you and your team are tasked with disarming a mechanical menace before catastrophe strikes. We began in a dimly lit laboratory, surrounded by an inventor's lifework. A pulsating hum fills the air as you realize the sound of the disturbance. A rogue robot guarding its lifeline, a set of batteries powering its destructive potential. As we embarked on this adrenaline-fueled mission, the immersive theme unveiled itself layer by layer. We deciphered intricate clues scattered throughout the lab, guided by the eccentric professor's blueprints. The narrative unfolded with thrilling intensity, drawing us deeper into the pulse-pounding world of science fiction and technological intrigue. The looming threat of a robotic uprising that we needed to stop by solving these clues and doing it all within the time limit created an atmosphere that transcended the conventional escape room experiences. So did we succeed? I'll come back to that later. What I do know is that sitting here, recounting that experience just tells you the power of immersive storytelling. So how do you craft a theme that captivates like the Rogue Robot Adventure? Duh. Here are 5 essential considerations to get your creative gears in motion. Seek a universal theme. Choose a theme that resonates universally, invoking curiosity and intrigue. Tailor the theme. Align it with your target audience and the essence of your gym experience. Consistency is key. Now, this is important. Immerse your clients in the theme at every step, from the moment they walk in to the end of their workout. Number 4, simplicity elevates. Aim for a theme that's easy to grasp, yet rich in depth and complexity. Embrace feedback. Continuously seek inputs from clients and refine your theme to enhance their overall experience. Once you piece together these 5 elements, consider the ways in which meticulously crafted narratives can elevate the simple act of exercise into a thrilling adventure. In the competitive world of fitness, success lies in creating a narrative that envelops your client in a captivating journey towards their goals. Crafting this narrative begins with understanding your client's needs, aspirations, and obstacles. Every step they take within your gym should be part of an immersive experience, resonating with the core narrative you've just built. Whether it's designing workout programs that tell a story of personal growth, employing physical therapy sessions that follow a progression akin to conquering obstacles, or fostering increasing regression training that echoes a journey of self-discovery and mastery. The key is the fusion of service with narrative. Just as our victory, we did it with a whopping 1 minute, 24 seconds left in disarming the rogue robot was a testament to the immersive potential of storytelling. Your clients' successes in achieving their fitness goals can serve as living testaments to the power of a well-crafted narrative within your gym. Embrace the role of storytelling and guide, weaving a compelling narrative that not only engages your clients on a physical level, but also immerses them in a journey of self-improvement and empowerment. Let the lessons from the Rogue Robot Redemption escape room remind you that the power of immersion, storytelling, and tailored experiences can elevate your gym beyond mere service provisioning, forging enduring connections and building that community of inspired individuals on their quest for physical well-being and personal growth. All right, then, this is Sumit Seth, co-founder of Naamly. To learn more about Naamly and discover how we can help in creating that memorable experience, get started on a free 30-day trial by using the referral code StrengthCoach.
All right, guys. Well, here we are. Like I said in the intro, we got a little special segment. I have on Chuck Wolf. Chuck is the director of Human Motion Associates. He's been in this business for a long time, over 40 years, as well as Coach Boyle. So we have over 80 years of experience. These guys were lifting the Flintstone weight type. That's what they look like back then when they were lifting. Well, we wanted to get on. This was Chuck's idea originally, and he wanted to get on and talk about really, some of the things going on over the last 40 years, joined Coach Boyle. So we thought it was a good idea. Actually, Coach Boyle talked about this last episode where this is this month we celebrated our 16th birthday of doing the podcast. So it's kind of like a little bit of an anniversary birthday edition of the podcast. So Chuck, first of all, thanks for doing this, bud.
Hey, Anthony, Mike, thanks so much for getting me involved with this. It's a true privilege, and it's just fun to see you guys. And congratulations and happy birthday. Both of you look a little bit older than 16, but hey, you guys look great. And thanks for doing all this that you have over the course of the years and contributing to the business the way that you do.
Absolutely. Well, I thought this was an interesting concept, and mostly because I felt like you guys are not that you're coming from different perspectives, but really kind of different starts and different kind of segments of the industry. The same though, the same. You've been both working with athletes and all kinds of people for so long. So to Chuck, again, I told you earlier this was your idea, but I usually ask everybody, what's your problem? What's going on? Why are you angry right now? But really seriously, what was the impetus for you to think this would be a good thing? I really want to talk about. Is there something that you felt like was happening in the industry that you felt like I wanted to reflect back on what's happening?
Hey, I'm going to be as transparent as I can possibly be, and being the old guy, I feel like I'm in this transition phase of where am I going? I know where I've been. When it comes to some of the technology that's in the business today, and especially social media, I am not great at it. It at times annoys me, and I feel when I think about this, I feel like my dad was way back in the day when I had a multi-component stereo system, and he couldn't figure out how are you getting the music out of here, and what is it that you're doing here. I know what I'm doing, and what's fun for me at one of the facilities that I'm affiliated with, there are a bunch of young guys, and they're kind of they're extremely gracious to let as they tell me, the OG do what I do, and they look at me kind of strange because I'm still coming back from the archaic age, as you said, Anthony, from the Flintstone era, and I'm looking at movement from the principles and concepts of movement, which don't change no matter what we do in the industry. But I sure feel like the technology's passing me by in certain respects. So I'm asking them a lot and learning from them a lot. But at the same time, I'm trying to figure out, okay, where does this old guy with a ton of experience fit in with with what's coming up in the industry?
Yeah. Mike, can you talk to that a little bit? Because you and I always joke about it. You have much more tech savvy than we always play around about. But you, especially with your facility, you talk about logistics a lot. It's not like you have the latest and greatest technology going all. You're as basic as they come, and there's a reason for it. Can you kind of touch on what Chuck just talked about?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Chuck and we had this conversation, and then he said, hey, this would be a great conversation to have, because I think when you become the old guy, and you and I have had this conversation on the podcast before, I mean, we were pre-cell phone, we were pre-computer, we were writing things on yellow legal pads, we were mimeographing. But I was just scanning back through my tweets because I had tweeted this morning about, those who don't know history are destined to repeat it, because I think what's happening now, and I tweeted the other day about this in terms of people just got to start training hard, jump, throw, sprint, lift, condition. It's not that complicated, but I think we're in an era of high complication right now in terms of whether it's VBT or HRV or RPR, or I guess it's all three-letter acronyms, but there's so much stuff going on and going around that I don't think it's bad, and I don't want to sound like the old troglodyte, but at the same time, I think it's still going to come back to training and people and weights and sprinting and jumping, and you're going to always be returning to the same central point. But I think what ends up happening now is that people are so distracted by the stuff that they're losing sight of the prize.
Yeah. Chuck, do you feel, because at the end of the day, it's about results, right? And I'm sure you're still getting great results with your people. Are you feeling this as well from the consumer that, hey, Chuck, you don't have, the VBT technology, you don't have this, or you don't have the flashy. Are you feeling that from the consumer as well?
I'm asked, well, why don't you have this stuff? I said, because one, some of it I don't know how to use. Secondly, I'm not sure what the purpose of it is, because as technology gets further along, I realize how much I've become, and I've been told this years ago, I just look at things in such minutia. And to me, the great majority of the technology is showing me a bunch of whats and not whys. 98% of the people that I work with have been referred to me because of injury. And it isn't just athletes, it's also grandma and grandpa, or somebody who's had a back surgery or cervical spine surgery. And I have to be a little bit more broad-based, but everything is based upon the principles and concepts of movement. The technology doesn't show us that. It shows me a bunch of whats. I just had a discussion yesterday with a pitching coach, and he showed me his pitching analysis documentation. I showed him mine. He said, yours is so much more detailed. I said, yeah, but we're still covering a lot of the same things that you are. And then we looked at some video of a pitcher who's having some issues. I said, it comes down to what's going on at the foot and ankle, the hips and the thoracic spine. And it isn't just that. It's now what's the reaction and the compensations that go along. I don't need the technology for that. And in certain respects, I've been realizing over the course of time, the fact that I don't need it is also becoming an issue or a question with the younger clientele that comes in, because for that reason, that technology is showing me what's and not whys. I get into the whys. I want to understand the whys that's causing what I see, and then be able to translate that to either a golf coach, a baseball coach, a football coach, or whomever it may be. But at the same time, it's starting to pigeonhole me a little bit.
Mike, would you say you've kind of been a little bit assisted by having a lot of the young guys around, young ladies around, as well, to kind of help you through that when you need it? And with what, let's just remind everybody, what technology, Mike, do you use? Because you're not really using anything super complicated, but tell us why you use it as well, because I feel like it's giving you some of the answers, or at least it's answering some questions for you.
Well, for us, we use heart rate monitoring a lot. And one of the things with heart rate monitoring that I really like is that it's very visual for the clients. And truthfully, it gives us the appearance of probably being more high tech than we are, because when people come in and they can see their heart rates up on a big screen TV up on the wall, that seems like, wow, these guys are really high tech. So I think there's maybe a little bit of posing kind of in there, because this is something, but I do believe in it. I'm a really big believer in that. Knowing what somebody's response to exercise is really important. And people will argue with you. And again, we've talked about this on the podcast, but people will argue, well, heart rate isn't as reflective as this or that. But my point is, it's the only thing you can easily monitor non-invasively. You don't have anything else that you can look at from the outside really simply and get some idea of somebody's response. So we use that. I started playing with VBT this summer because I think there's too much noise around VBT to ignore it. If you look at all the people that are using it, it makes you think that they must be getting something out of it. And I have to admit, I liked it, but I do find it's a little bit expensive, and it's not real easy to use, getting iPad mounts for racks and keeping iPads charged. There's kind of a lot of stuff that goes with the velocity monitoring, but I do think for today's kid, the gamification of strength training is going to be important. So that ability, I was looking at somebody who's talking about those Blaze pods on StrengthCoach today, just the lighted lights where you can, you have to go and tap lights. And I started looking at that and thinking, if you felt the need to do a lot of agility work, it probably wouldn't be a bad way to do it, because again, I think anytime you can gamify something and have it be beneficial, it probably benefits the kid. Even for us in terms of simple technology. I mean, just the electronic timer. We've got a beautiful wireless, Renegade electronic timer with the scoreboard. And that's a huge thing for our athletes love running time 10s, and they love seeing their time on the scoreboard. You don't have to, up in our Middleton facility, they have to do it old school, and they've got it up there and they run it off the handheld off the Brower. But down here in Woburn, we've got the scoreboard up in the wall and it's automatic and it pops right up. So I look at some of that stuff and think we've gone with some low-tech solutions that give us a more high-tech appearance.
And that's a great point, Mike, because the first thing that you said when you still work a lot with heart rates, I'm thinking with what Anthony just said when he opened up the session, that you have, and excuse me if I'm not phrasing it correctly, but you have still an old style gym with some high tech with some high end expertise and technology, but you're taking some of the basics and just applying it to, as you said, and you use the word gamified. And the thing that I've been finding interesting is the heart rate variability and the technology, the wearables that some of these athletes are wearing today. And yeah, it provides a lot of information. But again, being the old guy, we didn't have the quantitative aspect, but we've had the ability for the qualitative aspect of movement or conditioning or how somebody's responding. And if it was let it be a handheld stopwatch, we see that your times and your form is falling apart. That's all we need to do for today. I'm with you. Heart rate's still extremely important. And over time, there's been enough studies that show us the correlation of that with lactate buildup and the deterioration of performance. But it still comes back to the same thing.
Chuck, what with you, I know you do gait analysis. I looked on your website, you talked about gait analysis. So how do you do gait analysis? And don't you feel that if you had some of the technology, and I don't know that you do or don't, wouldn't it help you evaluate that a little bit quicker to get to your why?
Sure, great question. I do a lot of video capture, and the app that I use is Spark Motion. Even though it's two-dimensional, I can still get whatever views I need to. I couple that with my gait and motion analysis, where I get my hands on somebody and check and see what's going on at the foot and ankle complex, the subtalar joint, the hips, the thoracic spine. I can then correlate. Now, people have asked me, well, what about 3D video capture? And I say, yes, 3D video capture is interesting to look at. And when I see, especially the, first it was digitized, now you've got all kinds of AI that they kind of superimpose it with. I said, that looks great. And I know it can really show that you've got a lot of high-end technology, but that's showing me how somebody moves, but not why they're moving that way. And we can do an intervention, retest and compare. But I still default back to, let me look at the two-dimensional, 2 or 3 views, whatever I can take. I can split screen it, I can scrub it, and I can analyze what's going on from the ground up. That's enough for me. And I have not seen anything that can replicate that. Even talking with people who use force plates. Yes, force plates tell us a lot. But when I see pressure sensations and various aspects of the foot during various phases of the load and the explode during, let's just say, jumping, okay, why am I seeing this? And I've got to figure out the whys first, which can then impact everything else that we look at from there. You couple the two together, to me, now you got both ends of the spectrum and much more valuable information.
Yeah. Mike, you timing your speed work, that is not just putting the illusion of you're more high tech. You want that Right. So can you just kind of speak to that a little bit about making sure you have that correct and, or, those numbers as advanced as you can get?
Yeah, well, I think that's a different story in terms of that's because it's really precise in terms of we're timing out to the thousandth, really. So for us, we're going to get times, 1016. So it's super precise. And I love that. I love the fact that you can be, like Chuck was saying, stopwatch. When you look at what we tried to do with stopwatches was incredibly inaccurate in terms of, and everybody will tell you that, whether it was the 60 in baseball or the 40 in football, some guys were clearly better at it than others, and some guys could get you some really good times. But generally speaking, the handheld times were always faster than the electronic times. So the ability to get the problem, though, is now, and this is much like the force plate, we've gone to just fly 10s because nobody has any fly 10 comparison in their head like they do in the 40. So if I said let's just say I say to my son, Mark, you run your fly 10 right now correlates to a 5.240, that would not make him happy. But if I said your fly 10 time was 118, and that's pretty good, that's your best time ever, he's going to walk away really happy in terms of my fly 10 time was 118, it was my best time ever. I don't take the time to follow that out on the chart and say, and in actuality, that's probably a 5.240, which is what he would have been at that time. So the force plate the same way. The force plate numbers, everything goes down. And they say, well, that's the actual displacement. And I always tell them, I understand it's the actual displacement, but we got kids who grew up on vertex or wall touches or whatever it was, and they don't like the idea that their vertical jump went down 5 or 6 inches. Guys who had 30-inch vertical jumps don't like hearing that they're 23 or 24 or 25 on the force plate. So I think we've got a lot of, I talk to the force plate people, I've talked to them a bunch, and truthfully, they're not very open because I think they are scientists and they're very invested in the purity of their data. One of the things I had suggested to people was just give us your numbers with a vertex equivalent or a just jump equivalent or whatever it is, so that this kid we can then get, like Chuck was saying, that data. The problem with the data on the force plate too, we don't do it. It's expensive, which is one problem, but also looking at the force plate itself, you get too much information. Nobody can sort of, clean that information for me to be able to say, these are the 2 or 3 things that really matter. They start saying, oh, look at this right leg imbalance, and this is this, and this is the load phase, and this is the explosive, this is what's going in. And I'm like, okay, tell me the 3 things that matter if I'm looking at that data. Or tell me something, and this is why Chuck goes back to that. Tell me something of value. Tell me something that I can look at that data and say, okay, I have an athlete who's not eccentrically loading well, and that athlete needs more eccentric work. Or and they always say, this is going to help you to design the programs. I'm like, I understand that. How is it going to help me? We had the Hawkins guys in last year, and they said, well, we don't want to tell you how to design the program. I said, I want you to, because I don't understand your technology. So if you don't tell me what the data means and what it then at least proposes as an intervention, say in the weight room or in our plyos or whatever it is, then the data is not doing me any good. You're saying I need to either become a data interpreter or hire one. And I'm thinking, you probably already know, you have some answers in your head. Give me the answers. I can tell you I think you're wrong, but I can't tell you I think you're wrong if you don't give me any information. And all they want to do is, here's the printout, and here's the 400 things that it says. And there's too much. The force plate is too much. There's just so much stuff that it adds to you that I think they've hurt themselves as an industry, truthfully, because I said this to the Hawkins guys, the average practitioner as a strength coach is probably not he's not a Mensa member. He's not somebody who's going to deal really well with kind of an unlimited volume of data. But he's probably a guy that would do really well if you said to him, hey, these are the 3 things I want you to look for in your athletes. If you find A, then I want you to do B. If you find B, then I want you to do C. And if you find C, I want you to do D. That would make to me, that would make the force plate really valuable. And I think you'd sell a whole hell of a lot more force plates. I think I'd sell more force plates than they sell. If someone said to me, you're going to become a force plate salesman, I think I'd sell a lot of force plates because I'd be saying to people, here's what you're going to do. Here's the test. Boom. We're going to do a couple, we're going to do 2 double leg jumps. We're going to do single leg on each leg, whatever it is. And then I'm going to tell you what I think your athletes need based on that data. Whereas they're very hesitant to do that. So,
Chuck,
Well, I think you're right on with that, because I mean, let's go back now to some of the old stuff, Mike. I mean, as you were talking about that, I'm thinking of the Cybex, the Kincoms, the Biodex, when they would do open chain, leg extension, leg curl assessment. All right, but what's happening at the foot and ankle and the hip when you're seated and you're just doing knee flexion and extension? It tells us a lot of information, but is it useful information? The problem is, Boyle, you just said this a little while ago, the guys that are working on the force plates and they're in the lab, so to speak, they're not in the trenches. Show me the correlation. Show me how it gets from point A to point B, and show me how this is going to be helpful.
yeah. And I always say, show me what I should do different based on the data. That's what I want to know. I want someone to look at me and say, okay, maybe it might be for us. Someone might say to me, I need you to double your plyo volume, or I need you to do more loaded jumps. Or I need you to do, or maybe it's just a pure strength issue. This guy's just not strong enough. I need you to really focus on strength with this person, whatever it is. But I would like there to be an actual training recommendation that gets spit out based on the data. And they don't want they're very hesitant to give you that. And I think part of it is they think, I get it. Like, I'm not going to tell these guys how to coach their athletes. But when you're dealing with unfamiliar technology, recommendations don't hurt.
Mike and Chuck, do you guys feel like that is coming though? Like, for example, Mike, our friend Patrick Ward, right? He's I don't even know what he's considered now, but like a data scientist with the Seattle Seahawks, right? Oh, Devin McConnell started out with doing a lot of bringing a lot of technology into his job, as well as Kevin Neal under Mike Potenza. These teams are employing these things. Patrick must be doing something, and I apologize that I don't know what exactly right now. There must be some recommendations. So if it's on that level, that high, do you think it'll trickle down? Chuck, I know you were in professional baseball as well. Do you still talk to anybody who's, working in the teams that you know of? I know Mike was with the Red Sox in 2013, 2014. Do you guys feel like it will trickle down eventually, because we do have data scientists being employed in professional sports?
I'm finding the analytics interesting. Now, I'm going to approach this, Anthony, from the analytics side, because you've got these guys who are in the back that are analyzing every play, every pitch count, day, night, righty, lefty, so many variables. It's extremely interesting. At the same time, I heard it was interesting. You had two old guy managers that were playing against each other in the American League playoffs, and they were saying the analytics are helpful, but you can't take away what your instincts have been. And there's certain styles of baseball that have changed tremendously over the course of the years. That style of baseball, though, also goes back to what is it the organization is looking for, and they are relying so much back on the analytics, on bat speed, on arm speed, on velocity of the fastball, and vertical break and horizontal break. And it's extremely interesting. Can it be useful as a ball player? Yes. Has it been helpful? Yes. But when I look at a lot of the technology today, and I work with a lot of pitchers who have come to me with injuries, is, all right, you're showing me all this information, and it's useful information. As we just articulated just a little bit ago, in many regards, it's too much information. And I say, I don't need all that. Just give me, I want to look at video. I want to look at hand position. I want to look at arm slot. I want to look at axis of rotation and spin rate. But why are we seeing this? And it's definitely going towards the technology end of things. It's not going to change, but at the same time, as it gets further towards technology, and further away from principles and concepts of just movement and baseball, I think a lot gets lost in translation. And I'm not so uncertain that that's not partially a cause of the increased rate of injuries, at least in baseball and in any other sport.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about when you were with the Sox?
I'll go back to the baseball thing, but I think, and I had this conversation with Sue Calzone one time in terms of one of the big things, like I always tell people with pitchers, I don't want to look at anything because I'm not going to tell you to do anything differently, because that system by that level of development is so established that you have to be incredibly careful. And we had this guy, Scott Atchison, who I loved. He was, a great relief pitcher. He lacked about 12 degrees of elbow extension. And it was one of those things where he pitched that way. And I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, part of me would think we should fix that. But then you realize here's a guy who's producing all of this rotational force and rotational power minus 12 degrees. And if I gave him that 12 degrees back, I'm probably going to help make him hurt his shoulder, because I'm going to be changing that system. And Sue, I talked about that with Sue one time. She said, you're absolutely right. She said, I realized really quickly that whatever somebody looked like was how they looked. And you would try to maintain it. You didn't want him to go from 12 to 15. You didn't want him to get more contraction than he had. But if you got him and he was being successful at that. So I think the bad thing about the analytics is you have to be careful. And I always go back to my story about the guy on the motorcycle, Anthony. I tell the story all the time where the guy goes out for the ride on his motorcycle and it's a cold day and he grabs his leather jacket and he puts it on. He realizes the zipper's broken. So he sticks his arms through and he puts the jacket on backwards so it'll break the wind. And he bolts out on his motorcycle, and 2 minutes into the ride, he hits a patch of sand and he goes flying and he gets knocked unconscious, and a good Samaritan finds him. And shortly thereafter, the ambulance pulls up. The ambulance pulls up and, says, what's going on? He goes, I don't know. By the time I got his head back on straight, he was dead. Right? So it's a really absurd example, but you have to be really careful when you're at the elite level that there is some element of it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And there is a really thin line to walk with these people, particularly more so in pitching than anything. It's really be careful of, again, you've got to, you don't want to look at all the data and then realize, oh, wow, the data was wrong, or we misinterpreted that data. And in the process of misinterpreting that data, some guys got hurt. We broke some eggs. We made some omelets, but God, we broke a bunch of eggs in the process. And some of the eggs we broke were really, really good ones. So I think I'm hoping that we're going to get a little less analytic oriented. The one thing I've talked about this, I don't love the nerdification of professional sports. I think there is a tremendous appetite for data and for data analysts and for sports science people, because it makes these sort of Harvard MBA types that are at the tops of organizations, it makes them feel good. It seems like you're doing the latest and greatest things. But in general, when you really look at successful industries in general, particularly those that are people-centric, are probably not going to be that data-driven. And I think baseball is trying to make themselves a data-driven operation. And I don't know if that's going to end up being in their best interest in the long run.
I see the data-driven, at least in baseball, how it may help in positioning of a ball player, how it may help attack a ball player's weakness at the plate, how you may be able to shift ball players on defense, or how you attack a pitcher. But Mike, you hit on something so incredibly important, that the longer a ball player has been playing ball, and the longer, let's use pitching as an example, that he's been pitching with a certain arm slot, with a certain position, there's remodeling of the fascial system and the bony structure that you're not going to change. And you're setting them up for injury if you do. I remember years back working with a major league pitcher, Nick Goody at the time. He had come in for some work. He had 1 or 2 Tommy John surgeries, and I found a lot of limitations in his overall global movement patterns. And he said, after we went over the results of how it's been impacting him, because I've been doing a study now on UCL injuries for the last going on, 8.5, almost 9 years, and finding strong correlations of opposite hip to the stress on the opposite shoulder. And he said, look, I'm not going to change. I'm making too much money. I've been doing this too long. If I break down, then I'll break down and I'll be back. I understand that. At the same time, knowing the remodeling of the bony structures and the fascial system, I'm not going to change them. But all I said is, let's just work on some mobility. I'm not looking to change the mechanics.
Yeah.
And it gets down. We don't need any analytics for that. And you're dealing with multi-million-dollar corporations. They're going to take their risk at this point. It's gotten them to that level.
Well, I mean, pitching is a game of pitch until you break.
These days it is.
It absolutely is. Pitch until you break and then get put back together and go back and do it again. I mean, that's very much the way that it is. And I think it's really interesting. One of the things I really found was with our guys, I'm just going to really focus on either getting them strong or keeping them strong, because that to me seemed to have the highest benefit to prevention. And I saw that in the NHL too. Guys that trained consistently did better than guys that did not train consistently in terms of injury rates. In our situation, in 2 years with the Red Sox, the year before I went there, we came in and we had 11 guys on the disabled list the first year that I got there. And so I spent a ton of time just doing rehab and working with guys who had been injured. You know, I think we had 3 Tommy John guys. We had a back surgery. We had wrist surgery. The next year when we came in, we had 0. And I really think the one thing that was very consistent was that we were adamant about guys getting their workouts in. I've said that, and people, I think, look at me now and think, oh, he's so freaking old school. You know, he doesn't like technology. He doesn't like data. You know, it's all about consistency. And I'm like, yeah. But I've been a lot of places where they won a lot of games, and we won a lot of games because we were very consistent. Our process was good, and we were consistent with our process. And that was sort of my tweet the other day. We can argue the process. Chuck's process is different than Mike's process. But the difference is, if your process is good and then you're consistent with your process, you'll probably be successful, particularly if you have a track record of being consistent with that process and being successful. Everywhere I've gone, we've been successful with that process. Whether, you know, when I was with the Bruins, we went from the most injured team to the second least injured team. You know, at BU, we rarely had injuries. We won a boatload of games during that time. In 2 years with the Red Sox, we brought our injuries way down. We won a World Series. I mean, it's not, I think, literally, when you say it's not rocket science, it's not, but we're trying like hell to make it rocket science, which is a big part of the problem.
But Mike, isn't there some element though of that too, in terms of when you were with the Sox? I thought I remember you telling me about looking at some of the data and finding out that some of the guys weren't sleeping, and then it turned out that those were the guys that were pregnant, or their wives were pregnant, right? Or had young children. So that's where a time when it's like, you know, maybe if you had sleep data early on in your career, you would have prevented even more injuries. So can you just talk about that?
I think the difference, again, you're right. Type of data. What are you looking for? I think that's what you've got to be able to look at and say, what is the data that I'm looking for? One of the things that we clearly correlated was that our injured guys were almost all guys who either had pregnant wives or new babies. Because again, think about baseball. Baseball is a game of pattern, because you're playing 162 games in 180 days. And it's really hard as it is to get sleep and to stay in a pattern and to get 2 lifts in a week. It's a real, they always talk about it being a grind, but if you haven't been there, it's very hard to really associate what the grind is of Major League Baseball. When you take somebody and you add in a wife who's pregnant and or gives birth and a new baby, and that rhythm gets drastically disrupted, there's a real good chance that guy's going to get hurt. I bet a lot of teams, if they went back and looked at their data, they would look and see, wow, yeah, a lot of our guys that were hurt were younger guys who wives were pregnant. If you looked at, injury records and said, okay, when was this guy's, when did he get hurt? When were his kids born? I bet you'd see, because we saw a strong correlation with that. So the difference with that, Anthony, is that this is where I'm always, me, I'm a flip flopper. I'm jumping from side to side of the fence, depending on the day of the week. But I'm a big believer in accumulating the right data. I am not a big believer in accumulating the wrong data. And I think that what we're doing now is we're chasing data. And I think Chuck alluded to this, data for data's sake. We're chasing data because we can get data. And the other thing, especially in baseball, the players object to data. Is particularly a lot of the physical data. They get very concerned about where that data is going to go and what's going to happen with that data. Is that data going to be used against me? Is that data going to become part of my contract negotiation? Is that data going to be part of my personal record? There are guys who were doing stuff. People said, "Oh, we want to do this. We want to do this," and I was like, "We had guys who won't do it." He said, "We want to do hydration via urine sample." One of the first thing guys want to know, what's going to happen to that urine sample? And it'd be like, "Oh, I'm just going to freaking dip test it for hydration," and they, and they're like, "Well, we need to make, I need to know that."
Right.
There were guys who were really worried. There were guys who were saying, "Hey, you know what? Like, I don't want to be in a situation where suddenly someone's sending my sample off to get drug tested because they realize they have it, or because they can, or it's you get into it's a very complicated world." And
Mike,
it doesn't help.
If I can take what you were saying, and the ball players that their wives are pregnant, or they recently had babies, they're not getting as much rest. And let's go back to one of the very first things that you talked about is heart rate. They're not getting enough rest. What's going to happen to their heart rate?
Up.
It's going to be up. And we're looking at that technology today, or at least that understanding and the physiology and studies that have been done over time, is that you come into a training session or you wake up and heart rate's elevated. We've learned over time, lessen the intensity of the workout. Okay, maybe that ball player or that athlete needs more recovery time. That's where the wearables are starting to come into play. And I think you're seeing ball players become a little bit healthier systemically, not necessarily local injury. But now you're taking the old with the old and creating a new, so to speak, if that makes sense.
I think,
and it goes back to some of the basic foundations.
The wearable data is that you have to make sure that it's good data, because we've had that conversation. I know Brandon Marcello has talked about, and I won't badmouth any particular wearable company on the podcast, but there are some people who are testing the wearable data who believe that one company's data is better than another company's data. Mm-hmm. The good thing, and that's the other reason I like heart rate. If you get a good quality heart rate monitor, you're going to get, relatively speaking, EKG accurate heart rate, as particularly if you're wearing a chest strap. If you're not, but if you're putting a wrist strap on somebody, you're going to get data that's probably not incredibly accurate. So I think the quality of data matters, but I just think sometimes the general trend to me is that we're accumulating more data and more data analysts and more sports scientists because we think we should. It's part of the arms race in professional sports. It's every team, if you've got a data guy, I got to get a data guy. If you've got two, I've got to get two. And that's, I think the Red Sox now have four sports science guys. And I kind of look at that and think, what are the 4 sports science guys doing? And then I talked to somebody who said, we have to force plate our guys. We have to force plate jump our guys every week and send the data back to be analyzed. And there's a lot going on.
The wearables are part of the problem from the perspective of the consumer, the athlete, is getting a lot of data on their own, whether that's wearing a ring for sleep or, heart rate, HRV, steps, all of these things that they're getting and they're having access to. And now they probably come into a gym and they're expecting it as well. But,
Well, particularly, and again, it affects different athletes differently. I've had some guys, if you get the super high end type A guy, he's really affected by the changes in his data. If he starts looking at his data and saying, "Oh my God, my Oura ring says this," that guy can, I don't know if I should work out, should I lay down? What should I do? And it affects. So in some ways you look and think, maybe you're better off with no data with some of these guys.
Exactly right.
Those are the guys who want the data.
Yeah.
So also it's a very, very, very complicated process.
Chuck, with this whole conversation, obviously we've turned a lot towards technology because that's really the direction that we've seen the industry go. What are some things that have changed that you feel have been really good, whether that's technology or anything, to be honest with you, over the last 40 years since you've been doing this?
And then I think there's many things that have changed or that have come on the scene that have been really good. And just going back to our conversation right now, heart rate monitoring, I think is very important, particularly if we're dealing with multi-sport athletes or endurance athletes, or we're looking at athletes who are training or have had a lifestyle change. I don't know if it's necessarily equipment per se that, at least as I look at the industry, a lot of it's been pretty much the same. It's just a slight variation. It's the knowledge of the trainer, the knowledge that's coming out, and the content that's coming out that I think is what's been making a difference. People come, let it be if it's in the fitness business, if it's athletes, they're coming for expertise. The more that you can give them in a constructed way with the latest information, usable information. I'm talking about usable and applicable information. That's where I see technology or the industry's change. But so much of the change is starting to come around again that it's the same thing repackaged. And the more we change, the more we remain the same. So I can't think, Anthony, as you pose that question, I can't think of one thing in particular other than understanding metabolic information of how it's impacting an athlete and the nutritional aspect. I'm going to throw the emergent, not the emergence, but the knowledge that's come out on nutrition and recovery and sleep. That to me is more important than equipment, because I guarantee you that somebody, an athlete or grandma or grandpa, can come to Mike Boyle and just meet him in an open field and they will get a workout. We don't need a whole lot of equipment. And it goes back again. Mike has a lot of the basic equipment that's still necessary in every gym. It's not what's in the gym, it's who's in the gym that, in my view, is what's going to make a difference within the industry and within the health of whomever we're working with.
I'm going to look at it slightly differently, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think the biggest change has been that we have, at least in a very large way, not completely, been able to shift away from a powerlifting, bodybuilding type of mentality towards more of a sports performance mentality. Because I think when we started doing this, at least guys like me, it was pretty monkey see, monkey do in terms of, our first football workouts were whatever, bigger, faster, stronger, or, Bill Starr's Big Three or whatever, squat, bench, power clean. And I think we've been able to move beyond that. So I think that when I look at what's changed, it's the world of sports performance has evolved to the point where there's a lot more good coaches doing really good things and a lot less just kind of straight up old meathead. There's still, American football, rugby, there's still a few sports that are still pretty entrenched in that are making progress at a slower rate. And I think it's because they see themselves as having a bigger absolute strength requirement. But, the idea that the strength coach had to be this huge guy kind of who, couldn't move. I said, the average strength coach in the old days, if the bus was coming, he's probably getting run over because he probably wasn't quick enough to get out of the way. And I think we're seeing now of change in that particular regard.
What
Again,
about
that? To me, that comes back. I agree with what you're saying, but it comes back to the information that's out there and who's the technician that's applying it.
And maybe the technicians are getting better then,
Yeah.
which is good.
I think it's just too, the information age has given us all access to kind of right now. Obviously, there's a lot of crap out there, the influencer type stuff, but in general, we have a lot more access to information, right? That even with technology, to look at us as practitioners, to be able to give somebody homework to say, here's your program on video. And now you can get easier compliance. People can do stuff at home. You can send them off on their way, knowing, instead of giving them like the old physical therapist used to give, just like a sheet, right, with some exercises on it. I think those are some of the really good things as well. But Mike, I know you have to jump off, so we're going to let you go. I do want to kind of just continue this with Chuck, though, if that's okay with you.
I've got a little bit of time.
All right. I apologize. I have to get out here. I didn't. I'm glad this was a good, solid conversation. Usually Anthony and I don't go this long when it's just he and I. He gets sick of me after like 25 minutes. So,
Boyle, it was great to see you, pal.
It was great to see you too. All right.
You have a good holiday.
I'm going to see you soon here on us. Thanks, guys.
Chuck, let me just ask you, though, and let's wrap this up. We've been doing this for a little while now, so I appreciate it. So looking back, okay, and is there something that you would maybe have done differently, not from a training perspective, just from almost a business perspective, or if you feel like you're a little, kind of your words, a little behind the times and from the technology piece, is there something, what would you maybe, it's that letter to my 18-year-old self, what would you maybe do a little differently as from the strength coach perspective and from the business perspective moving forward, knowing what you know now about where the industry has gone with technology?
Anthony, this could be like a 5-prong approach that we take, but to look at it from, I'm going to put it in silos for a moment, looking at it from a programmatic standpoint. When I first started in the business, free weights were not safe. Okay, you should not be doing free weights because it's going to create way too many injuries. You need to be on selectorized equipment because it's safer, it's controlled. And I remember starting that way back in the day of the very first job that I worked in, and it was a large 100,000 square foot fitness center. And at the time, it was the training site of the Chicago Bulls, and the fitness center had set the policy. Everybody, all new members come in and they have to go through our introductory program, and it was all on selectorized equipment. Being an athlete, I, of course, observed it. I did it, and I'm thinking, this sure doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like how I should move. And I remember having a discussion with somebody who's longer than Mike and me, but Al Vermeil, and saying, Al, and I'm looking at his gym, and he had no selectorized equipment at all. I think he may have had a leg extension, leg curl machine for guys that Mark File, who's the athletic trainer and physio at the time, that he would use. But he said, we don't move that way. And that was a big opener to me. I said, because I don't feel like this is how we should move. So I went from that to everything. And then I started studying function and understanding human movement. Everything in my view went to the opposite side. Now everything has to be integrated training. And I saw that with the isolated work, I can gain strength, I can get hypertrophy, but I also lost mobility. On the other end, I realized I gained a whole lot of mobility, a lot of explosiveness and athleticism, but I wasn't quite as strong. So, all right, so how do I blend the two? And that's what I've tried to do over time. I've always tried to develop what I call the toolbox mentality. We should, I believe, all physios, athletic trainers, personal trainers, wellness coach, anybody who's involved with some type of fitness needs to have a toolbox mentality and know I can use this exercise when I need, even though I may not use it much anymore. And there's a reason for it, but have a reason why. I wish I developed that mentality earlier. And I wasn't biased one way or the other, because I see that there is a benefit. From a business perspective, I wish I had back earlier in my career, better business skills. I'd like to think I had good interpersonal relation skills, because no matter what, we're in a people business. As you and I were talking about earlier, and as Mike came on, I always used, and when I would do education at mentorships or at seminars, we're like bartenders. And we need to be able to get around to the masses of people and provide good customer service, because we're going to hear a lot of personal things. We're going to hear a lot of problems. We're going to hear family issues, but we're also here dealing with people's health. That to me is the most critical. But we should, as an industry, get better business skills. That's why when we see a third or more, 40% of people in the fitness business or business studios, or I should say fitness studios, they close. We just, as an industry, have not been good. So those are the two things that I would really have wished I focused on earlier.
Yeah, I always love the saying, coming from the restaurant business and bar business, was just because you can cook doesn't mean you should open a restaurant. So,
exactly right.
And I think we saw the same thing in our industry. Like, back in the day, it was people would take the biggest guy in the gym and say, "Hey, Chuck, what are you doing? Can you train me?" Right? And that's where those guys became trainers and gals became trainers. And now, obviously, things are different. But great stuff, Chuck. Thanks so much for coming on and kind of going. This was your idea. I appreciate you doing this. I thought it was a great idea to kind of get you guys on and to know that two super old strength coaches like yourself and Mike you guys are coming from different perspectives and but agree on so many things. And Mike and I always say sometimes that Mike always says about disagree, and you have to understand the difference between disagree and dislike. So you can disagree on programming or how to get somewhere, but doesn't mean you don't dislike somebody. And I think that could go a long way in other areas of our lives.
With some of the old, being the old guy in the facility and some of the young guys, and they ask why I'm doing certain things, and I ask them why they're doing certain things. I said, look, we can be going to the same destination, but take different routes to get there. That doesn't mean one's better than the other. All I want to do is, no matter what we do, no matter what era you're coming from, is that the principles and concepts of movement haven't changed. And if you base everything on that, you can create all different types of program designs to make people successful.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, Chuck, thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Anthony, this was a gas. Thank you so much, buddy. And it was so good to see you again. And it's been way too long. And hopefully we can maybe come up with a different topic next time and have the OGs and maybe get some other people involved with this. So it was
That'd be fun.
Thanks for your time, Phil.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 369 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, the show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. Thanks to Chris Pryor and the folks over at Perform Better. The holiday sales here, up to 40% off so many items. Items include Ultimate Sandbag, TRX trainers, all kinds of bands, med balls, plyo box, dumbbells, barbells, bumper plates, and racks even. Guys, check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Chuck Wolf for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. I thought that was a fun interview for me to do. I probably should do more of those with Coach Boyle and other coaches, because I feel like it moves along pretty quickly for me anyway. And we get some really good insights from obviously two legends there. Thanks to Sumit Seth and Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on a free 30-day trial. Guys, that's going to do it for this episode. I'm Anthony Renna. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.